The topic given to me today is managing self and resilience among the teachers. Now, this is a very important topic for teachers because we teachers are not only in the business of imparting knowledge, creating knowledge through research, but also we have to engage with our students on day-to-day basis. We spend a lot of time on counseling the students. If students have problems relating to subjects, they approach us. When they have problems or issues relating to their personal life, very often they approach us. And at the same time, we have our own personal lives. In our own personal lives, we have our own tensions, pressures, stresses, and difficulties of diverse kind. We need to be prepared not only for ourselves, but also for our students. And in this regard, therefore, two things are very important. One is we should understand very well who we are, what is our self. And secondly, we should be able to rise up to the occasion if we are faced with some very difficult situation. This is very important. We call this resilience. That is, if there are problems and if there are strains, like for example in the current pandemic, most of us are facing difficulty. We have been confined to our homes. Sometimes some of us might have experienced that the salaries have been cut. Some of us might have experienced different kind of other problems. Now in these times, it is very necessary for us to bounce back, to become resilient. And as teachers, I am sure many of our students would be approaching us, and they would be approaching us to find solace, to find guidance, to find solutions to their personal problems, study related problems, exams related problems. And therefore, we need to be equipped with the tools and techniques of bringing about resilience not only among ourselves, but also among our students. So let us begin first by understanding the self, what this self is. We have been made to understand, or rather I would say we have been given to understand, that we all have one single authentic self. There is one pure self inside us. There is one original self inside us. And it is that self which constitutes our inner core. And it is that inner core which actually determines our interaction with the entire universe. Now, but this is what we have been given to understand. Is it really so? Is there really a single self inside us, or we carry multiple selves inside us? For this, we should look at research. What does research say? The research relating to the brain. We all understand one thing, that we have two hemispheres. The brain consists of two hemispheres. One is the right hemisphere and the other is left hemisphere. Both the hemispheres are connected with a cord. The right hemisphere of the brain controls the left side of the body. For example, left hand, left arm, left parts of the body are controlled by our right hemisphere. This hemisphere is actually concerned with the sense of space. We call it spatial ability, comes from or is processed by the right hemisphere. It is also concerned with the feeling portion of the individuals. Now, if a person, for example, happens to have the stroke on the right hemisphere, then that person would not be able to process the information which is coming on the left visual field. For example, if the food is presented to a person who is having a stroke on the right hemisphere, on the left side of his body, if that food is presented on the left side of the body, that person would not be able to see it. This is the kind of thing it is. As far as the other hemisphere, which is called the left hemisphere of the brain, is concerned, it is concerned with our logical reasoning and speech. Now, Scientists have tried to study the functioning of both the hemispheres by studying the patients of epilepsy. Now, what epilepsy is? In case of epilepsy, an electrical storm somehow gets initiated in one part of the brain, and then it spreads in the whole brain, and as a result the brain becomes completely disconnected with the body and the brain stops controlling the body. Now what happens that in case of very severe cases, the storm begins say from the left side and it spreads to the right side, or it starts from the left side, spreads to the right side. So what the doctors did, that the cord which connects the right hemisphere and left hemisphere, that cord is disconnected by the doctors. And these patients were examined by the psychiatrists and neurologists. And the studies and experiments conducted with these patients provided a very rich mine of information regarding how the brains of human beings really function. In this context, I shall like to talk about the experiments done by Professor Roger Walcott Sperry, who received his Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine in the year 1981. The first experiment that I shall like to talk about is the experiment he conducted on a teenage boy. This boy was asked what he would like to do when he grew up. The boy, whose cord connecting the left hemisphere and right hemisphere had been disconnected, simply answered that he wanted to become a draftsman. The answer obviously was provided by his left brain hemisphere. Now this left brain hemisphere we know is concerned with logical reasoning as well as speech. Now this researcher was interested in knowing what was the other hemisphere saying. The answer had already been received from the left hemisphere. Left hemisphere had told that this person wanted to become a draftsman. Now the researcher wanted to know what did the right hemisphere say. So right hemisphere, although it also has a vocal language speech center, but this center cannot control language. So for this purpose, what the researchers did, that they presented letters in the form of a scribble to the left visual field, which is seen by his right hemisphere. And when the scribble, the letters written on small pieces of paper were presented to his left visual field to be read by his right hemisphere, when these were presented to him, the left hand of this boy started moving and started picking up letters. And these letters were picked up and a word was formed, and the word was automobile race. Now this is a very strange kind of finding, my dear friends, that left hemisphere is saying one thing, that is draftsman, and right hemisphere is saying something else absolutely different, and that is automobile race. What could be the connection between the two? Now experiments needed to be conducted to find out, is there a connection between the left hemisphere and right hemisphere, and if there is a connection, what kind of connection it is, what is the nature of that connection. So some of the experiments were conducted by another experimenter. His name was Gazzaniga. This gentleman and his team conducted an experiment on a similar patient. What they did, that to the left brain of the subject, they presented a picture of a chicken claw, and at the same time to the right hemisphere, that is in the left visual field, they presented another picture of a snowy field, a landscape which was full of snow. And then this person was asked, what did you see? Now obviously left hemisphere has a reasoning, it also has a speech center, so he answered it is chicken claw. Now as far as the right hemisphere is concerned, it also has a speech center but cannot control language. to find out what the right hemisphere had to say, they presented a number of pictures to him at the same time. And he picked up a snow shovel. Now, this was again very strange. Later on, this boy was asked, "Why did you pick up the snow shovel?" So he said, "There is a chicken claw. Chicken, therefore, have to be kept in a barn or in a place where chicken are to be kept. And if there is a snow there and snow is falling upon it, then this has to be cleaned, and this can be cleaned and removed with the help of snow shovel only." Now, this was a very, very important kind of finding. The left side of the brain was shown the chicken claw, and the left side of the brain had absolutely no idea about the information that was being read by the right side of the brain, because the cord connecting right hemisphere and left hemisphere was disconnected. But still, what had happened was that the individual had created a story around it. When he was asked, why did he select the snow shovel? So he simply answered that snow shovel is needed for cleaning the snow, because the chicken claw goes with the chicken, and the chicken have to be kept in a shed, and if there is a snow, then shed needs to be cleaned, and for the purposes of cleaning the shed, we need a shovel. Now, this is a very important finding. I must say it again. The reason is that there is something which is connecting the left side information and right side information, and an interpretation is being given to that. That means what this patient did, this patient saw the chicken claw with one hemisphere, saw the snow field from the other hemisphere, but created a story around it. He interpreted the entire information around the two objects which were seen by two different hemispheres independently. So that means that inside us there is one experiencer, there is left hemisphere, right hemisphere, both gather the information from outside, but there is another self inside us which interprets this information, and this information is then processed, and a certain story is woven around it, a certain meaning is assigned to that particular thing. Now, there was one more interesting experiment involving the right hemisphere that was conducted. To one particular patient who was a woman, the doctors, the experimenters, presented some pornographic pictures. When the patient looked at those, that is the right hemisphere of that patient looked at those pictures, she giggled, she smiled, she laughed, and then she stopped. So then the doctors asked him, that is the experimenters asked her, what was it that you saw? So she smiled, she giggled again, and she said she saw a flash of light. Now, this is the left side of the brain which was speaking, because her left brain and right brain were disconnected, cord had been disconnected already. The information had been presented to the right side of the brain. Speech center is in left side of the brain. So when she is speaking from the left side of the brain. And what is she speaking? She is telling us a lie. She is saying that she saw a flash of light. She did not want to say what she had actually seen. When they asked her, why did you laugh? So her reply was that there are certain artifacts inside that room, there are some furniture inside that room, and they are looking very, very funny, so I smiled. Now, this experiment is also an important experiment, and it is confirming the findings made by Gazzaniga, that not only do we receive information from our left hemisphere and right hemisphere, but we create stories, we spin stories, we create narratives, we create interpretations around those facts which are objectively obtained from the environment. Now, this is one aspect. The aspect is that we human beings do not have a single authentic self only. There is one self which receives the information, but there is another self which interprets the information, which creates narratives around that information, which spins stories around that information, which gives the presentations of different kind, which adds imaginations to that particular information, which adds meanings to that information which is received by us. The information gatherer inside us collects data through the five senses that we have. It gathers visual data through eyes, auditory data through ears, olfactory data through nose, taste related data through tongue, etc. Now, these data are interpreted by our interpreting self. The interpreting self creates stories around it and it gives meanings to it. Therefore, it is responsible for generation of the feelings, the reactions and the decisions that we make in our life. And if we have proper understanding of how our interpreting self is behaving itself, we have proper understanding of ourself, ourselves, and therefore with the help of this knowledge we can manage our emotions, manage our reactions, manage our decision making processes in a much better way. And we need this understanding much more during the dark times, during periods of difficulty and hardship. In the face of sudden shocks or troubles, some people fall in the deep well of victimhood and depression. Why does it have to happen to me? This is the feeling that they develop. And as a result, they become practically paralyzed and develop feelings of helplessness, dejection, and abandonment. On the other hand, there are some people who bounce back, who react in a manner as to face the challenge, and they do it seamlessly, without any difficulty, without any problem. Now, this particular reaction, the second one that I am talking of, this is called resilience. Resilience is a very important aspect of life because there is no human being who does not go through ups and downs in the life. And there are some people, as I said just now, who are able to bounce back, snap back very easily, whereas others, they buckle down seriously under pressure. Now, we need to understand what is it that makes some people bounce back and what is it that makes some people buckle under the pressure. Now, one thing is very clear. It is the interpreter self inside us which is responsible for this. The interpreter self of those who are resilient, who are able to bounce back, is such that it makes them interpret the events as a challenge for them. It makes them interpret the events in a manner that they are prepared to face that reality very strongly, and they are able to create new meanings in their life as a result of this. And these are the people whose interpreter self is able to create an improvisation in the life in such a manner that they are able to gather themselves completely, they are able to develop new skills, they are able to find new vistas, new methods, they are able to invent new relationships. Now, the question is, can this quality of becoming resilient be learned, or it is something which a person is born with? Lot of research has been conducted in the field of resilience, and it has been found that it is something which can not only be learned, but it can be trained also. And one thing very interesting about the resilience is that over time it changes in life. A study was conducted at Harvard University, and the study was a longitudinal study. It was carried on for a period of 60 years. And this study made a very interesting finding. And the finding was that over time, people tend to become more resilient during their lifetime. It is very interesting. Yes, of course, it is quite possible for some people to become antithesis of resilience also. But most of the people over time in their life tend to become resilient. And this disproves a very important impression that we generally have about the people. We feel that the old people do not have resilience. Old people cannot change themselves. Old people cannot modify themselves. But the study has shown that as the years advance, we tend to become more resilient. Old people bounce back at a very fast pace. Issue now at hand is, how can resilience be built up? How can that emotional agility will be created, evolved and developed among individuals so that they do not buckle under pressure of difficulties or troubles? Now, a lot of studies have been conducted in this regard, and we can in general identify a few points, few aspects which can be utilized for the purposes of creating resilience in our life. These points are as follows. The first aspect or first point relates to facing the reality. That is to say, the event that takes place in our life or the difficulty that occurs in our life, it must not be escaped. We should face it, face in terms of the true dimensions of how it can affect us, how it is affecting us, and so on. I'll give you an example from the corporate world in this regard. It was the year 1993 when an attack took place at the World Trade Center in the United States. This is the same World Trade Center which was attacked by two airplanes in the year 2001. The event is now known as 9/11. Now, when the first attack took place in the year 1993, at that time, the company, famous investment company, Morgan Stanley, had its offices over there. And they realized at that time that World Trade Center is the symbol of commercialism in United States. It is the symbol of the commercial power of United States. And Morgan Stanley had about 2,700 people working for them in that particular building. Morgan and Stanley management decided that we shall have a backup plan in case of a similar attack taking place, and they decided at that moment that we shall have a proper evacuation plan for our employees, and also we shall have alternative offices at other places so that in case the attack take place in future, then we should be able to keep our business running so that the clients do not suffer. Now, as a result, what they did, that they set up a number of offices at other places. Now, it looked foolish to so many people. It looked strange to so many people that Morgan Stanley investment bank was wasting a lot of money in organizing offices, in managing offices, renting offices at places other than their main office. And those offices were just and simple backup offices rather than the functional offices. Now came the September 11, 2001, the day on which the famous 9/11 attack took place, when two aircrafts came one after the other at a gap of 15 minutes and crashed into first the North Tower and then the South Tower. The first attack took place at 8:46 a.m. in the morning, and this took place on the North Tower. At 8:47, Morgan Stanley started evacuating people from there, and within 10 minutes time, they had practically evacuated everybody, practically, except a few people. And after 15 minutes time, the second plane also crashed into the same tower, that is the South Tower, and it also crashed. Morgan Stanley lost 7 employees in the second attack. Now see, one day before the attack took place on September 11, 2001. On 10th September 2001, the plan to have a number of offices at other locations, having backup offices, was a wasteful expenditure. But one day after September 11, that is on September 12, 2001, this was something which was appreciated by everyone around. The situation was very different. The company did not suspend its functioning operations even for a day. They were up and standing again the very next day of the attack. That is on 12 September 2001, they were all working and functioning. Now this is a very great example of how to face the reality, how to accept the reality. And if we accept the reality in this manner, in this way, then the resilience is automatically bound in our life. Another aspect of resilience training is that we create meaning during the difficult times. Actually, the ability to see reality is very closely linked to the second building block of resilience. This building block of resilience is that we are able to make meaning out of terrible times. We all know that the people who under duress, under difficulty, under trouble, in dark times throw up their hands and they start crying, why this could be happening to me. Such people see themselves as victims, and living through hardships carries no lessons for them. But resilient people devise constructs, they develop concepts around their suffering, and they create some sort of new meaning for themselves and for others. The dynamics of meaning making is that the resilient people build bridges from present day hardships to a fuller and better constructed future. These bridges make the present manageable, for the lack of better word, removing the sense that the present is overwhelming. This concept is beautifully articulated by Viktor E. Frankl, an Austrian psychiatrist and a survivor from the Nazi camps. In the midst of staggering suffering, Frankl, during his stay at the Nazi camp, invented what we call today the meaning therapy. It is a humanist therapy technique that helps individuals and people to make the kind of decisions that will create significance in their life, that would create a new meaning in their life, that would create a new hope in their life. There is a very famous book written by Viktor Frankl. The name of the book is Man's Search for Meaning. Here he describes a private moment. And it was in that private moment he was able to create this theory or this understanding of creating meaning during the dark times, during difficult times. He writes in his book that when he was in the Nazi camp and he was going through all those inhuman sufferings that were being inflicted by the Nazis upon him and his inmates in the prison or in the Nazi camp, at that time he would imagine that when he goes out of the prison, he will give a series of lectures about what suffering during the Nazi camp meant to the people, how it helped them, how the people could survive during those sufferings that were inflicted upon them, during those inhuman treatment that was given to them, and what understanding we are developing about the human being's survival in the most dark of the darkest time. Now, actually, the resilient people are able to create that hope in the times of difficulty. For example, at present, there are a large number of people who are suffering because there have been layoffs, there have been pay cuts, there are people who are not able to meet their EMIs, and of course, the life has become very difficult. The relationships have come under strain. Now, as far as the resilient people are concerned, these people are able to create a new meaning to their life. They are creating a new hope in their life. For example, some people have started developing new skills. They are looking for new jobs. And there are people who are looking for shifting their professions from the existing professions. So like this, the resilient people try to adjust themselves and create a meaning in their life. In the end, I shall like to highlight a few more aspects that have to be kept in mind when we want to give training for resilience or when we want to develop resilience for ourselves. These are all, of course, based on research, and these aspects are: number one, that resilient people are able to form attachment to others. They are able to create an inner psychological space for themselves, inner psychological space in which they are able to reflect, evaluate, examine, and create new strategies and methods for facing the difficulty. They do not give up. Again and again and again, within that huge psychological space, they build up new methods, new strategies to find out something new, some way out of their difficulty, so that they are able to not only survive but also grow and evolve. Thirdly, the resilient people have a great mysterious ability to develop connection with those people who will be able to lift them out of it. They have this mysterious ability of identifying who can help them, number one, and how they can help them. And number three, these people are able to unhesitatingly go and reach out to these people without hesitation for help. They do not suffer from that ego inside that they should not be taking help from others. So this is yet another aspect. Lastly, the interpreting self of the resilient people is such that they create a shield around them. And what is that shield? That shield is that the feeling of disappointment does not come to them in spite of great difficulty. They might feel discouraged, but not disappointed. They might feel a little laid back, but they do not abandon the effort. This is very interesting thing about these people. So now, the point is, my dear friends, that resilience can be built up if we can train our interpreting self to evaluate the events or interpret the events in such a manner that, number one, we are able to see the reality as it is and prepare for it, prepare to face it. Number two, we are able to create new meanings in life in such a manner that we are able to create hope for ourselves. We have to train our interpreting self in such a manner that we develop that shield around us, that negativity, negative thoughts, pessimistic thoughts do not affect us. And thirdly, we have to train our interpreting self in a manner that we are able to create a huge psychological space around ourselves, that we are objectively able to evaluate our difficult situation in one hand, and we are able to create appropriate strategies, and we are able to go out and seek help when we are not able to do something on our own. Now, with this, my dear friends, I come to the end of my discussion or discourse here. We shall be discussing whatever questions you might have during the live session. Thank you very much.